Welcome to part two of Senior Moment with Nurse Linda. Today it's COPD, and we're talking about cause and effect.
Causes and complications.
People are interested in coming by train to hear this. This is Dr. Charles Campbell. This is Nurse Linda right there. And I'm learning things about COPD, which I didn't think was a real disease because the commercial made it look like. Yes, do you have restless toe syndrome? Does your big toe wiggle? That it's join our organization.
No, COPD is real, and back in the day it was known as emphysema, but now it covers a number of different diseases. And I bet you cannot guess, Dr. Charles, what is the leading cause of COPD?
Probably smoking.
There you go. Like we've said on many of our shows, we've talked about heart disease, we've talked about colon cancer, multiple cancers. They all lead with smoking being the number one cause. Potentially the number one cause. It's not always the only cause.
Yeah, I tried to sue Sir Walter Raleigh, but too late.
No. And there's a nice little twist in this, a little something I learned, which we're going to talk about, is if you smoke, if you have an enzyme that's missing called alpha 1 antitrypsin, it puts you at a higher risk of developing emphysema and COPD symptoms. Yes. So that's very interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But other leading causes of emphysema and COPD, exposure to gases or fumes, and those are not specified because it could be almost anything.
From gasoline to
Many times it's petroleum based, but not always. People working in the popcorn factories recently were turning up with COPD from the butters that they use. Yeah. Yes. So exposure to secondhand smoke. I cannot stress this enough. If you smoke, do not smoke inside your home, especially if there are children present. Please go outside. Do not expose them to that smoke because the damage is being done now. It's very important. Exposure to pollution. People who live in highly polluted cities, who work outdoors in those cities, tend to have a higher rate of COPD than people who live in Denver, Colorado, just to pick a city that's, up there and away from all of that.
Clear mountain air.
Yes.
All you do is get frostbite and freeze to death.
Yes.
But other than that, that's only in the winter.
Another one is frequent use of cooking fire without proper ventilation. And that's why when you go into a restaurant, these restaurants are checked frequently because when you have those open grill fires, they have to have proper ventilation with it. And the ventilation has to be complete and cleaned on a regular basis.
Oh, at Ryan's, they have a Mongolian stir fry.
Yes.
They have air vents above them that are just going roaring all the time, clearing it up. And they clean those grills like practically every minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's to keep you from getting COPD.
Getting the people who are cooking COPD, it's not going to help the people in the restaurant, but they're not there for that long to get that exposure. It's the people who are working right at the grills who would be at high risk for that.
I might add, up in the Northeast, because of Hurricane Sandy, or Storm Sandy, or Sandy, whatever, the bitch. Some people, to keep warm, were throwing their hibachis into the living room and getting really bad sick from carbon dioxide poisoning.
Yes.
That's not COPD, but that's still something that'll mess your lungs up.
It will mess your lungs up, absolutely. And if they did it often enough, you could have the long-term effects from it. That's the idea. You need the extended exposure if you survive. And they've had a few people who didn't, so it's a problem. We go back to, on a rare occasion, non-smokers get COPD, but they're finding it's those people who lack that protein in their bodies, the alpha 1 antitrypsin. Now, what that is, it's a protein made in the liver. Its purpose is to protect against the harmful effects of other proteins that have other purposes, but sometimes can cause harmful effects in certain areas of the body. And this alpha 1 antitrypsin protects specifically the lungs along with some other organs. But that's their job. And when that is not being produced, you don't have that protection. So you are more at risk of developing COPD than someone who has that protein. So very important.
Good to know.
Yeah. Now, some of the complications of COPD and why it's important to follow up with your doctor and make sure he's monitoring you on a regular basis. You're taking the medicines as prescribed. You can develop from lung disease an irregular heartbeat, which may not be reversible. So it's very important.
Not reversible? May not, you said may not be.
May
It
not
could
be
be.
reversible. It could be, depending on how quickly they get to it. Can they manage it with medication? Can they correct the disease causing the irregular heartbeat and have you go back to some normalcy? So if they can catch the effects of COPD and hold them off for a longer period of time, your heart won't be as affected.
Do you have any stats on what percentage of the population has this?
No, I do not. No, and I
It'd be
apologize
interesting-
for that.
It'd
Yeah,
be interesting to know.
I didn't get those numbers. You may develop right-sided heart failure.
Right side heart failure?
Right-sided heart failure. That's right ventricular heart failure. And that is because of the lung disease. Because when the blood comes into your heart, it goes into the right side first. It goes from the right side to the lungs. If your lungs are literally all gummed up and not functioning the right way, the blood backs up into the right side of the heart because it can't get to the lungs. It's sort of like plugging up the works, so the right side of the heart becomes enlarged. And that creates a whole set of problems on its own. And that's due to chronic lung disease. That's all it's due to. The blood can't flow back out.
Can't
the
put
way
a
it
stent
should.
in there or
Not to the
over the-
lungs, no. No. It's not like you're not trying to create blood flow through the heart muscle, which then you put a stent in. But when you're creating blood flow to the lungs, because it's the lungs themselves that are gummed up, and the blood comes from the right side of the heart and bathes the lungs to bring in oxygen, clear out carbon dioxide, and it can't do that.
Is that
because
what
of
my
the
doctor's
disease.
listening for? Every time we get a physical, he sticks one of his stethoscope things on me, in front and back, makes me deep breathing.
He's
Is
looking for fluid, and he's looking to see how much air you're passing through your lungs.
Evidently, I'm okay.
Yeah, sort of like what you should hear when the doctor listens to your lungs is if you breathe through a straw and that sound it makes, that hollow sound, that's what the doctor wants to hear. And when he doesn't hear that, it sounds muffled, it sounds distant, it's very hard to hear, then you've got something else going on. So that's very important. You develop pneumonia. You're more prone to develop pneumothorax, a collapsed lung, because your lung is diseased and you develop problems with
okay.
that. Weight loss, malnutrition, because you're working so hard to breathe, you're burning extra calories for breathing, and you're not eating as well as you should be. That's causing a problem. Bones, osteoporosis,
I thought that's
when you
lack
have
of calcium.
COPD. But it can be caused by other diseases as well. And a need for breathing support. And we're going to talk about more in the next section. Yeah, those machines that people wear at night, you see advertisements for those too.
Oh, to
That can
breathe.
help sometimes, yes.
Okay.
So we'll
Soft
describe
power.
those a little bit more, yes.
Coming up in our next segment,
We're going to talk about treatment and what you can do.
and you can do something about this.
Absolutely, yes.
It's not always fatal.
Not immediately, no. It can be controlled for many years.
Well, you're listening to Senior Moment with Nurse Linda, part 2 of COPD, and we'll be back with more fascinating information in a moment.